My name is Peter David. I'm 73 years old. Some of you might remember me from a few weeks ago. I shared parts of my life I had never spoken about publicly, and the response was more than I expected. I read your comments, I saw your stories, and I realized something important. When someone speaks honestly about regret, it gives other people permission to do the same. But today I need to talk about something I left out, something deeper, more painful, something that changed the way I understand love, marriage, and what it really means to share a life with someone. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't dramatic. It's not scandalous. It's not the kind of story people whisper about. It's worse than that. It's ordinary. And that's why it's dangerous. My wife Eleanor and I were married for 41 years. 41 years. Longer than many of you watching have been alive. And if you had asked me during most of that time whether we had a good marriage, I would have said yes without hesitation. We didn't fight much. We were loyal. We paid our bills. We raised our children. We showed up to weddings and funerals together. We built a stable, respectable life. From the outside we looked solid. And here's the uncomfortable truth. I thought that was enough. Eleanor died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. It started as vague stomach pain in early spring. By midsummer she was in hospice care. 4 months. That's all it took. 4 months to go from discussing dinner plans to discussing morphine doses. In those final weeks when the world had shrunk to hospital rooms and whispered conversations, she said something to me that I replay in my mind almost daily. "Michael," she said softly, "we spent too much time trying to be right, and not enough time trying to be close." At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant. I felt defensive. We had a long marriage, a faithful one, a steady one. Wasn't that what mattered? We hadn't betrayed each other. We hadn't fallen apart. We had endured. But endurance is not the same thing as intimacy. For years, decades, Eleanor would suggest small things, not grand vacations or expensive gestures. Small things. Let's take a cooking class together. Why don't we go for evening walks like we used to? Remember when we stayed up late just talking? And I always had a reason. I was tired. Work was demanding. Money needed to be saved. The timing wasn't right. Maybe next month. Maybe after the busy season. Maybe when things settled down. I didn't realize I was slowly teaching her something. I was teaching her that her invitations didn't matter. It wasn't intentional. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't dismissive in tone. I was practical, responsible, focused. I believed love was measured in reliability, in providing, in not doing anything obviously wrong. What I didn't understand is that love isn't sustained by avoiding harm. It's sustained by active connection, and connection is fragile. It doesn't disappear overnight. It fades quietly. One postponed conversation, one declined invitation, one distracted evening at a time. You don't notice it happening because there's no explosion, no dramatic argument, just a gradual cooling. Eleanor adapted. She stopped suggesting classes, stopped mentioning trips, stopped asking me to dance in the kitchen. She found friends who shared her interests, activities that didn't require my enthusiasm. We remained kind to each other, polite, functional, comfortable, but comfortable can be a slow form of distance. I told myself this was normal, that this was what long marriages looked like. Passion fades, routine replaces curiosity, stability becomes the goal. I thought we had succeeded because nothing was broken. I didn't realize something vital had already begun to disappear, and by the time I understood it, time itself had started running out. After Eleanor passed, the house became unbearably quiet. People warn you about loneliness, but they usually describe it as missing someone's presence. What they don't tell you is that you begin noticing all the moments you failed to create while they were still there. In the first few weeks after the funeral, I stayed busy. Paperwork, thank you cards, sorting through her clothes. There's something surreal about folding the sweaters of someone who will never wear them again. You hold fabric that still smells faintly like them, and your mind refuses to accept what your eyes already know. But it wasn't the big memories that hurt the most. It was the small, ordinary ones. I'd walk into the kitchen at 6 p.m., out of habit, expecting to hear her ask what we were doing for dinner. I'd glance at the couch, expecting to see her curled up with a book. My body still anticipated her presence long after reality had erased it. And in that silence, her words came back to me. We spent too much time trying to be right, and not enough time trying to be close. I started replaying our arguments, not the loud ones, but the subtle ones. The debates about finances, the disagreements about how to handle our children, the countless times I insisted on logic over listening. I was proud of being rational, calm, measured. If she was upset, I would analyze the problem, offer solutions, explain why things weren't as bad as she felt. I thought I was helping, but what she wanted wasn't a solution. She wanted to be understood. There's a difference. When your partner says, "I feel lonely," and you respond with, "But we spend plenty of time together," you may be factually correct, but you've just told them their feeling is invalid. You've chosen being right over being connected. And I did that more times than I can count. I remember one evening vividly. It must have been 15 years before she died. She came home from visiting her sister and seemed distant. I asked what was wrong. She hesitated, then said, "Do you ever feel like we're just roommates?" I laughed, not cruelly, not mockingly, just dismissively. I said something like, "That's what marriage is after a while. It's stable. That's a good thing." She nodded. She didn't argue. She didn't push. But that was the moment she stopped trying to explain what she was missing. I see that now. At the time, I thought stability was the ultimate achievement. No chaos, no betrayal, no dramatic breakdown. I measured success by what we avoided. But love isn't defined only by what doesn't happen. It's defined by what does. Do you sit close on the couch, or at opposite ends? Do you ask questions and wait for real answers? Or do you multitask while they speak? Do you reach for their hand in public? Or has that become unnecessary? These things seem trivial. They aren't. After Eleanor's diagnosis, something shifted. The doctors were honest. The prognosis wasn't hopeful. Suddenly, all the practical concerns that had dominated my thinking for decades felt insignificant. I found myself sitting beside her hospital bed, holding her hand for hours. Not because I had solved anything, not because I had advice to give, just because she was there. One night she looked at me and said, "You're different." I asked what she meant. "You're here," she said. "Really here." That sentence shattered me. I had been physically present for 41 years, but emotionally, intentionally, fully, not always, not enough. In those final months, we talked more than we had in years. About fear, about regrets, about memories from when we were young and unsure of everything. We laughed about old disasters and cried about moments we'd taken for granted. And I realized something that still aches when I think about it. The closeness I thought would naturally last forever had required effort all along. Effort I often postponed. When you assume there will always be more time, you become careless with the time you have. I believed retirement would be our season of reconnection. That once work slowed down, once responsibilities eased, we'd travel more, talk more, sit together on the porch without checking the clock. But life doesn't wait for your convenient season. Cancer didn't care about my future plans. And suddenly, all the evenings I had chosen paperwork over conversation, television over touch, silence over vulnerability, they felt permanent. Not catastrophic, not dramatic, just permanently lost. And that is a very heavy thing to carry. Grief does something strange to memory. It sharpens certain moments with unbearable clarity while blurring entire years into a dull routine. After Eleanor was gone, I didn't just miss her, I began auditing my own behavior, quietly, ruthlessly. There is a particular kind of regret that doesn't scream. It whispers. It shows up when you're washing dishes alone, when you wake up at 3 a.m. and reach across an empty bed, when you hear a song that once played softly in the background of a life you assumed would last longer. I used to believe regret came from big mistakes, betrayals, explosive arguments, dramatic failures. But my deepest regret isn't something I did, it's something I didn't do consistently. I didn't nurture the connection when it was easy. I saved my tenderness for crises. I became attentive when she was sick. I became present when time was visibly short. But love shouldn't require a diagnosis to become urgent. One afternoon, about a year after her passing, I found an old photo album in the attic. It was from our early years, before children, before mortgages, before promotions. In those pictures we were always touching, her hand on my arm around her waist, leaning into each other, as if gravity itself pulled us closer. I tried to remember when that changed. Not when we stopped loving each other. That never happened. But when we stopped expressing it so freely. It wasn't one event. It was accumulation. Responsibilities stacking higher. Fatigue replacing curiosity. Efficiency replacing romance. We became excellent partners in logistics. Mediocre partners in intimacy. And here's the uncomfortable part. No one warned me. Because from the outside we looked successful. We celebrated anniversaries. We attended family gatherings. We functioned. But functioning is not flourishing. There were signs, subtle ones. She talked more about her book club friends than about us. She began traveling to see her sister without asking if I wanted to join. She developed routines that didn't include me. Not out of resentment, but adaptation. Humans adapt when their needs aren't met. They shrink the need instead of confronting the disappointment. I mistook her independence for contentment. It wasn't that she stopped loving me, it's that she stopped expecting more from me. And that realization came too late. In our final long conversation, the kind you have when both of you know the horizon is near, I asked her directly, "Were you unhappy?" She took her time answering. Eleanor always chose her words carefully. "I wasn't unhappy," she said, "but I was sometimes lonely." Imagine hearing that from someone who slept beside you for 4 decades. Lonely, not abandoned, not mistreated, just emotionally alone, more often than she should have been. I wanted to defend myself, to list the sacrifices I'd made, the bills I'd paid, the nights I stayed up, worrying about our future. But none of that addressed the real issue. Provision is not the same as presence. Responsibility is not the same as intimacy. You can fulfill every visible duty and still miss the invisible one. I think many men, especially in my generation, were taught that love meant stability. Protect, provide, persist. We weren't taught how to sit with feelings without trying to fix them. We weren't taught how to say, "Tell me more," instead of "Here's what you should do." And so we built sturdy lives with quiet emotional gaps. If you are younger and listening to me, understand this. Emotional distance rarely announces itself dramatically. It grows in the space between postponed conversations, between not now and maybe later, between assuming they know you care and actually showing them. I used to believe that as long as there was no betrayal, no shouting, no disaster, we were fine. But love does not thrive on the absence of disaster. It thrives on intentional closeness. In her final days, when speaking became difficult, Eleanor would simply squeeze my hand when she needed reassurance. No lectures, no analysis, just contact. I began responding the same way, holding her hand longer, sitting closer, letting silence be shared rather than separate. And in those quiet hospital nights, I understood something that took me 70 years to learn. Closeness is a daily choice, not a default setting. And if you stop choosing it, even gently, even unintentionally, it slowly chooses to fade. After Eleanor passed, people told me time would soften things. They were half right. Time softens the sharp edges of grief. It makes it possible to breathe without feeling like your chest is collapsing. It allows you to look at photographs without immediately breaking down. But what time does not soften is awareness. Awareness actually grows louder. 6 years later, I am not haunted by arguments we had. I am haunted by ordinary Tuesdays. Evenings when she sat across from me at the dinner table and I nodded while half listening. Saturdays when she suggested we take a drive somewhere new and I chose the couch instead. Small invitations to connect that I treated as optional. They weren't optional. They were the relationship. We think love is proven in emergencies. in hospital rooms, in financial hardship, in dramatic sacrifices. And yes, those moments matter, but emergencies are rare. Ordinary days are constant. Your marriage, your partnership will be defined far more by how you handle a random Wednesday night than by how you handle a crisis. I learned that too late. After the funeral, I went through Eleanor's closet. I wasn't ready, but the house felt suspended in time. Her sweaters still carried her scent. In one coat pocket, I found a folded piece of paper. It was a small handwritten list. Not dramatic, not poetic, just simple bullet points. Visit the coast in autumn. Learn to paint landscapes. Have dinner outside more often. Talk more. Assume less. That last line stopped me. Talk more. Assume less. For decades I assumed she knew how much I loved her. I assumed there would be more time for trips, more time for deeper conversations, more time to prioritize us after retirement. Assumption is dangerous in love. You assume they know. You assume they understand. You assume they'll wait. One of you won't. I don't say that to be dark. I say it because it's mathematically true. In every couple, someone is eventually left alone with memories and unfinished intentions. Now I sit at my desk most mornings with a cup of coffee, and the house is quiet in a way it never used to be, and I would give anything for one more ordinary breakfast with her. Not a grand vacation, not a milestone anniversary, just toast, coffee, and a real conversation. That's what regret does. It recalibrates value. Things I once considered minor, a walk after dinner, holding her hand in public, asking follow-up questions about her day, now feel priceless. If you are watching this and you share your life with someone, I want you to understand something clearly. You don't strengthen a relationship by avoiding conflict. You don't deepen love by simply staying loyal. You don't protect intimacy by playing it safe. You strengthen it by engaging, by being curious even when you think you already know them, by saying yes a little more often, by putting the phone down, by asking, "What are you thinking about lately?" and actually listening to the answer. Love requires maintenance, not dramatic, exhausting maintenance, but steady attention. Neglect is rarely intentional. It's gradual, comfortable, reasonable. That's why it's so dangerous. I was not a cruel husband. I was not absent in the traditional sense. I came home. I paid bills. I showed up to family events. But emotionally, I coasted. And coasting in a relationship is like slowly loosening bolts in a bridge. It still stands. It still looks solid. Until one day the strain becomes visible. Eleanor once told me years before she got sick, "I miss how we used to talk." I laughed it off. I thought she meant nostalgia. I didn't realize it was a warning. Don't ignore the gentle warnings. If your partner says they feel distant, don't argue facts. Listen to the feeling. If they invite you into something, a hobby, a dream, a trip, don't immediately evaluate practicality. First, evaluate connection, because connection is the point. Now, when people ask me what I would change if I could go back, my answer is simple. I would choose closeness more often than correctness, presence more often than productivity, curiosity more often than comfort. You still have that choice. If someone is waiting at home for you tonight, don't treat that as ordinary. It isn't. It's temporary. Beautiful and temporary. Sit a little longer at the table. Ask one more question. Take the trip. Hold their hand first. Say what you feel without being prompted. One day, you will either be grateful you did or wishing you had. I live with the second version. If this story resonates with you, if it nudges you even slightly to show up differently in your own relationship, then it was worth telling. That's why I speak now. Not for sympathy, not for absolution, but because you still have time. And time, when used intentionally, is love's most powerful gift.